Thanks a lot. All right, I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. So how's that, Eleanor? Looked okay?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us. Let me just a second. So before I talk about Warblers, just a few brief words about the Clifton Institute. I know we have a few new people on the call here. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have 8 full-time staff, and we're funded by individual donations and foundation grants. And our 3 program areas are education, restoration, and research. Our mission is to inspire a deeper understanding and appreciation of nature, to study the ecology of our region, to restore habitat, and to conserve native biodiversity. And we have a 900-acre property located just north of Warrenton, which is protected permanently under a conservation easement. And we have a fantastic variety of habitats, and I think we have 208 bird species now recorded on the property. And like Eleanor said, we're not just interested in birds, and we've documented now more than 2,300 species of animals, plants, and fungi on the property. And one of the recent highlights was this cup fringe lichen, which is one that is an indicator of old growth forest. So it's cool to find that one still hanging on here on Pig Nut Mountain. We're located in Fauquier County in Northern Virginia. That's it for Clifton. So why warblers? So like Eleanor said, no matter what my interest is, and no matter how embarrassed I was to be a bird watcher when I was in middle school, I would always still go out in spring migration. It's a really special time. Like she said, we have a lot of tropical species that are coming through and a huge diversity of warblers. It's also a challenging group where the songs are really similar and pretty high pitched. The birds themselves are often up in the treetops as well, so that's another challenge to try to see them. But it really is a delight to have 10 or 15 species of warblers in your backyard in the spring. It's really cool. And in addition to that, they're really diverse and how they look and how they make their living. So, the water thrush on the bottom right looks pretty different from these other brightly colored ones. And there's some that skulk around the understory, like the Connecticut in the top right. So here's a typical species in northern Perla. So I actually heard the first one for me of the season today. So they're one of our earlier species. They're going to be pretty common breeding in river bottoms in our area, but they're just now starting to show up. And northern Perla is an example of a short distance migrant. So as you can see, they winter in Mexico and the Caribbean, and also in South Florida. And then they come up not that far, some of the population, just the southeastern US, but they do go as far as eastern Canada. So this is a short distance migrant. We also have some really long distance migrants like black-poll warblers. So these make an incredible journey from northern South America all the way up to Alaska. And then they do the even more impressive trip on the way back. They make a direct flight from New England to Trinidad. So another reason, that I'm interested in warblers is because of their fantastic migrations that they are able to do. And eBird is a really great tool for learning birds and enjoying birds, and also keeping track of what you see. And you can go back years later and see what you found. That's a cool thing to do. You can do it on your phone or on the computer. And the other thing about eBird is that based on this volunteer data, everybody submitting all their checklists, you end up with a really great idea of where birds are going to be found. And this is a bar chart showing the seasonal abundance of some of the warblers in our area. And you can see that May is the time to be out. So especially early in mid-May, if you want to get out and see a lot of migrating warblers, that's the time to do it. So now we're in mid-April, where it's just starting. So I haven't heard a yellowthroat yet. I'm sure they're A few of them are around now in the county. But you can see that next week there's going to be a much better chance, and then after that a really good chance of seeing a yellowthroat. So you can check it out by going to Explore Data on eBird and clicking on the bar chart. So we're lucky to live in an interesting area for birds in terms of breeding warblers and not just migrants. So we're in the Piedmont, and we're not far from the mountains or from the coastal plain. And by being located in this area, we're able to visit really different habitats that have a totally different set of breeding warblers and other birds, which is another joy. So, for example, Thompson Wildlife Management Area on the top of the Blue Ridge, that's the highest point of Fauquier County, and there are cerulean warblers breeding there. This is in the top left. So this is the high elevation, mature forest bird in our area, at least. We also, in the top right, have Kentucky warblers that breed here in the Piedmont as well as in the mountains. They like to have a well-developed understory. They need a shrub layer. Then we also have shrubland birds like prairie warblers in the bottom left that require early successional habitat. And finally, in the bottom right is the promontory warbler, which requires swamp forest or bottomland or riparian habitat. So hard to find in Fauquier, but you don't have to go that far to Fairfax County where you can find them, which is really cool. So you can do quite a transect from the mountains to the coastal plain just without going very far. Okay, so to get to the song, so this is going to include migratory and breeding warblers, and they're in order of similarity of the song in rough categories, and hard and easy species are mixed in. So please don't get overwhelmed. Focus on the species that have yellow stars by them. Those are the ones that are important to learn and also pretty easy to learn. And the reason we do this every year is because we all have to brush up on these songs before the warblers start coming through. So it's all about practice. And again, it's like Eleanor said, it really helps to get outside and practice the warblers outside. And then you also get clues on where you are, what kind of habitat, and that really helps you narrow down the list of possibilities. Right. So we'll start with a bird that is not a warbler, just to look at the sonogram and to hear a beautiful song. So this is, I hope that sound is coming through okay for everybody. This is a really complicated song produced by a sub-Austin passerine that has a complicated syrinx. This is a winter wren. And basically on the x-axis of this figure is time, and on the y-axis is the pitch of the song. And so I'll play it slow just to give you an idea of exactly what we're looking at. And it may be hard to see in this presentation, but it helps me to study sonograms, and you can get this free software, Audacity, to open up songs and recordings so that you can look while also listening. So I'm going to slow it down here. Try this. No, it's not slow. Here we go. All right, I'm going to slow it down even more. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to look at these sonograms, and it helps me learn new songs. Okay, so to the warblers, the buzzy category, we'll start with the northern parrot. This is a buzzy song and a common bird in our area. So it's a fast, rising, metallic trill, I would say. And that last song you can hear is a variation of the parula, and it's kind of a stuttering version. And the thing that, is a blessing and a curse about warblers and other birds is they have really variable songs. And sometimes, this is how evolution works. They tweak their song to try to attract females. And so there's always going to be variations, but you want to go back and listen for the classic song, and they usually end up making that as well. All right, that's a parrot. So next we go to Blackburnian. This is a beautiful one. Breeds a little bit at high elevations in our area, but it's a pretty common migrant through here. And it's similar to a parrot, but higher pitch. Yeah, so I would say it's more musical and less metallic than the parrot. And it really rises at the end. It gets really high. A lot of people cannot hear the last few notes of the Blackburnian. That makes it harder to identify. But even without those last few notes, it's more musical than the parrot. And that's one thing you can see in the sonogram is that it's really clearly three different notes. So it really, at the top, the very end is where it gets really, really high. Next, we go to cerulean warbler. So like I mentioned, this is a breeder at high elevations in our area, and it unfortunately is declining really fast across its range. So it's one of the rarest breeding birds in Fauquier County. So a real treat that we have them breeding at Thompson, and hopefully that one. So the cerulean is similar. It's another buzzy one, but it's going to be lower pitched. And I would call that a very burry call, a rough call, song that is. And very buzzy. And when you look at the sonogram, you can tell these buzzy songs based on the fact that they're very spread out and fuzzy looking. That means that they're buzzy. So that's the song of the cerulean. That's not a common bird, but one to listen for in Thompson and also in higher elevations of Shenandoah National Park. Next, we have another buzzy one that's even deeper, the black-throated blue warbler. So this is a mercifully understory warbler that is down pretty low and a lot easier to see than some of the others, and it also has a really unique color combination. So this is another really buzzy one, higher pitched actually, really buzzy and a rising trill. So it goes up in pitch and it's a fairly high pitched butt. And then there's a variation. And sometimes they do that, it's less common, that's a really low pitched version. Next, we have the black-throated green warbler. This is the one that I signed off one of my emails with, Z, a classic warbler song. And this one breeds in the mountains in our area as well, but it's a really common migrant, especially in the fall. So we have a lot of them coming through in the spring, but especially in the fall. Yeah, and the sonogram here, if you're able to see that, the buzzy calls are the really wide ones, and then those two pure tones are quite narrow in pitch. That's kind of cool. So that's a Zuzu note. Say it again. And that's a variation that they often make.
That's what you usually hear.
So next we go to the trills. So we'll start out with pine warbler, chipping sparrow, and worm eating. These all make trills, and they have different qualities. So they are pretty similar, and it helps a lot to think of what habitat you're in. So if you're in a parking lot, it's going to be a chipping sparrow. If you're in a mature forest on a slope, it's going to be worm eating. If you're in a pine forest, it's a pine warbler. And of course, there's some overlap in these habitats, especially between the pine warbler and the chipping sparrow. But that helps a lot, the habitat. So this is pine warbler. We're starting out with pine warbler. It's pretty slow compared to the other two and lower pitched. So those are pretty different. You'll notice we switched to chipping sparrow. That's a faster trill that's metallic. It's not pure tone like that. Or not as musical as the pine warbler. But that last one is a more musical chipping sparrow. So it's not easy, but again, it's still faster and a different quality than a pine warbler, and also higher pitch. That's chipping sparrow. And that last one was a worm-eating warbler, so very thin, hard to hear. It's kind of insect-like. Yeah, so thin, not musical, pretty quiet. That's the worm eating. And again, the habitat is your friend here.
It's confusing the fuck out of me.
Orange crowned, if you're not an advanced bird watcher, you can close your ears and take a break for this one because we're unlikely to see or hear these, but we do get a few that come through. So this is just for practicing or maybe, you know, aspirational. So it's pretty similar to those other trills, but it goes down. Okay, next we have palm warbler. So this is another, you know, the season can also be a clue for you. So the palm warbler is one of the first warblers to come through, and they actually winter along the coast of Virginia in small numbers. So, but if it's in early April and you hear a song, it could be a palm warbler. It's unlikely to be pretty much any of the other warblers except for maybe yellow rumps. And we have two varieties. We have the brown and the yellow palms. The yellow palms breed in eastern Canada, and they tend to come through here a bit earlier than the brown. So I've already seen a couple of them this year. So the thing about palm warblers is that they're bobbing their tail all the time. And so, you know, and they're usually in pretty open areas. So if you see a bird bobbing its tail out in the open, and it's not a phoebe, probably a palm warbler if it's early in the year. And they are almost always making their distinctive chip note. And every now and then they also sing. But the chip note is the first thing to look for. So I'll play that. So, you know, chip notes are difficult. They take a lot of practice, but this is a really emphatic, dry chip note. And if you ever go to South Florida or the Bahamas or Caribbean in the winter, there are palm warblers everywhere, and this is one of the sounds of being down there. And also, if you're here in April, you might hear it too. So now I'll play the song, which you have to be pretty lucky to hear. And that is a very raspy trill. It's a trill kind of like the others, but really rough. Palm warbler. Now we're going to a unique one that really is like none other, the Tennessee warbler. And that, in our area is not a common migrant, but we do have several of them that come through every year, and they tend to be at the end of migration in May. So right now is way too early to be hearing one of these. So it's a very jumbled song, and it's in three parts, three distinct parts. So that's Tennessee, and the song is more fun to listen to than the bird. It's not a very beautiful bird, I'm afraid, but the song is really cool. Ping pong ball, that's the field sparrow, which a lot of people confuse with prairie warblers because they're found in the same habitat, so we're going to play both of those.
How can you confuse them with prey?
So it's these beautiful, clear, loud whistles that get faster, which makes it sound like a ping pong ball dropping. And sometimes it rises. So that last song is the one that might fool you for a prairie warbler, which is a rising song. The key difference is that prairie warblers are buzzy songs, whereas field sparrows are pure tone whistles. So that's the field sparrow. And now we'll play the prairie warbler. So it's also rising, but it's really buzzy and thin. And both of these birds prefer shrubland habitat. So we have a lot of field sparrows breeding at Clifton. And if you go to nearby Leopold's Preserve, you can find plenty of prairie warblers breeding there. So the habitat's the same, and sometimes they both rise, but if it's a clear whistle, it's a field sparrow. If it's buzzy and thin, it's a prairie warbler. High thin buzzes, well, I think we just did a high thin buzz, but it's a little hard to define these categories. So next is blue-winged warbler. This is a real beautiful bird that again is found in early successional habitat. None of them are breeding right around here though. So we do have them in migration. Hello?
Hey, Bert, can you maybe try to turn the volume up on Audacity just a tad?
Yeah.
That might be too, we'll see. Some folks are having a little trouble with the songs. Thanks.
And I'll turn my speaker down too. That might, I don't know. Yeah, well, let me know. So blue-winged warbler, early successional habitat and early migrant. So it won't be long before we'll get a few of them come through. It's always a treat to see them. They're not a common migrant, but we do get them every year. So I don't know, can you hear that, Eleanor?
I can, but I've been able to the whole time, and the volume is the same. So I don't know what there is.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's as loud as it goes. So, but this one is a good one to test it on because it's very high and thin. It's a bee buzz call, extremely buzzy and thin. And closely related to this bird, and perhaps even the same species, is the golden-winged warbler, which is another beauty. This bird is declining even faster than cerulean, unfortunately, so this one is really not doing well. We still have a few in Virginia, in Highland County in particular, none right around here that breed, but they're also in early successional habitat. And similar tone, just a different pattern for the golden wing. You may have heard this on NPR lately, actually. So yeah, so the first note is really high, and then it goes down to 3 at the same level. Very thin, very fuzzy, hard to hear like an insect. Next to the Carolina wren group, so these are broadly similar to a Carolina wren. First, we'll start with the common yellowthroat. So he says, witchity, 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 witch. And I heard at the end a variation, but they usually say witchity, witchity, witch. And this is a really common bird in our area, especially in meadows or shrubland. So it's similar to the yellowthroat. This is an ovenbird, so this is a very explosive song. It gets louder at the end. It's pretty level, but it gets louder at the end. And ovenbirds are found in open, mature forests. So we have them breeding in our area, but usually in places without much of an understory. Another ovenbird, so hopefully you can hear that it gets louder at the end. Okay, that was a switch to Kentucky. So here's some images. So you can see the ovenbird, the Kentucky warbler, and the Carolina wren. These three are frequently confused. Found in pretty different habitats. So like I said, the ovenbird is in mature forest, hardwood forest without much of an understory. Kentucky, they prefer to have a thick understory. And Carolina wrens are everywhere, but especially around houses. So Kentucky, we'll play that again, and hopefully ovenbird is still sort of in your head. So Kentucky does not get louder at the end. And it's not quite as musical or beautiful as the Carolina wren song. I like the Kentucky warbler, but. So that was the Carolina wren for comparison. So it takes practice, but again, the habitat is a clue. This is another one for the experts, so don't worry about this one too much, but if you want to practice, this is Wilson's warbler. This is a rare migrant through our area, but every year we get one or two somewhere in the area. And it's a beautiful, distinctive bird, but the song is not distinctive. At least not to me. It's just a fast trill, pretty nondescript. Next, we have another rare bird, mourning warbler. So these breed in the mountains of West Virginia, not too far from here, but at the highest elevation in West Virginia. And we have a few that migrate through. It's always really a good day if you find a mourning warbler. But that's a pretty distinctive, very powerful churr sort of song. It goes down at the end. That's a mourning, so don't worry too much about that if you're a beginner. Then we have the operatic melody. So this is what at least Eleanor thinks, and I agree. I don't remember which opera. Maybe she can chime in. So this is a really explosive, cascading song. Louisiana water thrushes are one of our earliest migrants to come in. They are a long-distance migrant, so they're winter in Central America, but they're usually here by early April. They tolerate frost just fine, and they breed along creeks and rivers in our area. And for me, it's a distinctive cascading song.
Okay, everyone, this is where I want to turn your volume down because I can sing. What they're singing is La Donna Immobile, La Donna Immobile. That's it. That's what they're singing.
Nice. Thank you. And sometimes they get carried away, especially around dusk. That's their whisper song. So Louisiana water thrush.
You get to hear it.
Next, we have yellow-throated warbler. This is another cascading species that's found in riparian areas. So, you know, unfortunately, yellow-throated warblers and Louisiana water thrushes are often found in the same areas. So you can't use habitat as much. But if you hear the song coming from the tops of the trees, it's a yellow-throated warbler. The Louisiana water thrushes are down low. So it just takes practice, but it's faster and it descends more than the Louisiana water thrush, and it's more regular. So they're back now, breeding along the big rivers in our area, like the Potomac and the Shenandoah. Next, we have Swainson's warbler. This is another one for the experts out there because we don't have them breeding in our area, but they are in the Appalachians and in swamp forests as well in the southeast. They have a similar song. Again, it's always a treat to see a Swainson's warbler and hear their really cool song, which I think says "Sue Sue Sisterville." Yeah, but clearly of the same sort of group as those other two, but you don't have to worry about Swainson's breeding around here or migrating through for that matter. It's a really rare migrant in our area. Explosive melody, so related group. This is a northern water thrush. So this species doesn't breed in our area. They do breed at high elevations in the Appalachians, but not around here. They do migrate through though in pretty good numbers, especially late in the season. This is a typical looking northern water thrush that's pretty yellowish, and it has the eye stripe. The pale eye stripe is narrowed towards the back, so that's how you can distinguish a northern from Louisiana. They also tend to be found around ponds, whereas Louisianas are found along creeks. So the song is totally different from a Louisiana. The northern water thrush is more of it's not nearly as musical or varied as the Louisiana. To me, I get it more confused with like a Canada or a Connecticut than I would with a Louisiana water thrush. Yeah, it's a very powerful song. You were not going to miss that if one of those is singing during migration. And next we have Canada, and then we have Connecticut. So these are all sort of grouped by similarity as best we can. So Canada does breed at the highest elevations in Shenandoah. It's another understory warbler, which is awesome. It's one of the most beautiful ones and found down pretty low, so you can often get a decent look at them. And they have a song that's pretty similar to the Louisiana water thrush, but they're found in different places. They're not associated with wetlands. So it's a very jumbled song. Not particularly musical, This is a pretty distinctive one for me, jumbled and also it helps if you're up in Limberlost Trail or somewhere on the very top of Shenandoah. That's where you would hear them breeding. Then we have Connecticut. This is probably the rarest warbler in Virginia. We don't get many of these, you know, in the fall. You can, if you're really lucky, you might see one. They breed up in Minnesota, but always worth listening for the song. My dad, one time, I grew up in Alabama, and one time my dad found one of these that was singing, which is really fantastic. But I don't think I've ever heard a Connecticut sing. So similar to the Canada in that it is a jumbled song, but it's slower than the Canada. So that's Connecticut. Now on to full-throated sweet songs, some more common birds that come through in good numbers and also breed here. We have chestnut-sided. So this is a really pretty one. It's found in early successional areas, but in near forest and usually at high elevations in our area, like in Shenandoah National Park. Please, 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 pleased to meet you. Yeah, so if you're lucky, they're going to be doing their classic, please, please, pleased to meet you. But if you're unlucky, they're going to be doing a more general song that can easily be confused with magnolia or yellow, unfortunately. Like that song right there, I would have trouble telling that from a magnolia or a yellow. Like James Lindemer says, I don't make the rules, but I can try to help you distinguish these. So, but again, these three birds sometimes make really similar songs, and so the best way to tell them is to find the thing or to use habitat and time of year as included. So in our area, chestnut-sided is not a common breeder. Like I said, they're on forest edges at high elevation. Magnolia breeds in a few places in the high elevations of West Virginia. I'm not sure it breeds in Shenandoah at all. But yellow warbler is a fairly common breeder in our area along rivers, especially they like willows and wetlands. So yellow warbler is one that, you know, if you hear in the summer in our area, if you hear a song like that, it's probably a yellow. But now we'll play the songs of magnolia and yellow. So this is a magnolia. This is a rollicking sort of song that has this fairly distinctive couple of notes at the end that go down. Yeah, and this is an advanced one. I would say don't worry about this one if you're a beginner. This is one to work up towards. Took me a while to be able to distinguish magnolia. And it's not that common in our area. Now to yellow, sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet. So beautiful yellow bird in wetlands who says sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet, if you're lucky. And then at other times it'll make a sort of not a very distinctive song like that. So, and then that one to me sounded like please, pleased to meet you, which is what the chestnut-sided says. So again, don't despair, practice, make a recording, put the recording on iNaturalist, and we'll try to help you out. For solitary warbler is next. So instead of saying sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet, it just says sweet, 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 sweet. And habitat is a big clue for prothonotary. So if you're at Huntley Meadows and you're in a swamp forest and you hear something like this, it's prothonotary. If you're on the top of a mountain in Shenandoah, you're never going to see a prothonotary warbler. So that's prothonotary. And they are the color of the yolk of a free-range egg. I mean, that is a special bird. So go to Huntley Meadows if you haven't already. Next, we have Nashville. So Nashville kind of looks like a mourning warbler, but it has a yellow throat instead of a gray and black throat. And it has this complete white eye-ring. This is an uncommon warbler. It's always a nice find, but we get a few of them every year. And their song is fairly distinctive. So you can hear that this song is clearly two parts, and it goes down strongly at the end. And there's only a few birds that do that. So really redstart and Nashville are the only ones that do that. So I find that to be pretty distinctive. I mean, you don't hear a lot of Nashvilles, but if you do, hopefully you can tell. Next, we have difficult and variable. That sounds like a pretty terrible category. That sounds like a challenge. Difficult and variable and thin. That is one of our most common breeding warblers, American redstart, in the mountains, that is, and along a few rivers. It's not a common breeder in the Piedmont. But if you go up to Shenandoah in a month, there are going to be hundreds of redstarts breeding up there. Highly recommend doing that, going up there at dawn. So, and it's also a unique, black and orange one. So this is the classic redstart song. It's fast, it's fairly high, and it clearly goes down at the end. And so again, if you're lucky, you're going to mostly hear them doing that. They do other songs that are less distinctive, unfortunately. So that one went down at the end quite clearly. But that's a pretty hopeless song there. And so even though I've been doing this my whole life, I still, if I hear that song, I'm probably not going to know what it is. And so, it takes time, it takes some persistence to try to see the bird, or you can use the clues on the habitat and the time of year. And you can also easily make a recording on your phone to share it with other people and try to figure out what you heard. Now we have the high and thin and maybe not so difficult category. This is a really common migrant that comes through black and white, and it also breeds at higher elevations in our area. And it says weesey, weesey, weesey. It's like a squeaky wheel. So this, unfortunately, a lot of folks have trouble hearing it because it's so high. But if you can still hear it, it's a really distinctive song. Weesey, 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 weesey. That's black and white. Cape May, so this bird has really increased. It's actually a positive story where there are more Cape Mays than there used to be. Really pretty one, yellow with this amazing chestnut cheek patch. And it is even higher and thinner than black and white. So this is a real challenge for most people to hear, but it's actually a common migrant through the Piedmont these days. And they breed way up in the boreal forest, so we don't have them breeding here.
lot of
So very high, thin, and fast, and really similar to bay-breasted. And so whenever I hear a song like this, I mean, the chances are that it's the Cape May. It's a more common bird than bay-breasted as a migrant in our area, but it's always good to get a look at these guys and confirm them. You can also record them, put them on a naturalist, and other people can help you, but the gold standard is to get a look at them. So that's Cape May. That's if you're lucky enough to be able to hear that. Then we have bay-breasted, which looks completely different from Cape May, but sounds pretty similar. If you're lucky, you can get you'll hear them doing the song where it's more rollicking, but in other situations, it's just like we heard for Cape May. So in that situation, it's rollicking in a pretty distinctive pattern. Still fast and high, but hopefully a distinctive pattern. But that's more typical, unfortunately. This is what we usually hear from a bay-breasted. It's pretty hopeless, very high, thin, and not very distinctive. So if you hear something like that, try to get a look and see if it's a bay-breasted or a Cape May. Then we have blackpoll. So when the blackpolls show up, you know at the beginning of the end, you know migration is almost over. The vast majority of species have already showed up, and blackpolls are really at the end. But despite being late, you know, which we can excuse them for because they came all the way from South America. Despite being late, there are plenty of them. So blackpoll is a really common bird, but they don't show up until late. And they are high and thin as well. Yeah, so, you know, very high, thin, fast, and unfortunately, a lot of people have trouble hearing this one. But keep trying. It's a common bird. You can get them. Difficult and variable, another exciting category here. And unfortunately, this is one of our most common ones, the yellow-rumped warbler. This is one that winters in our area in small numbers, and then they start coming through early in migration and singing away and really common. So they're just now starting to come through in good numbers. And they really are, they warble. And it's not that distinctive, unfortunately. But their call note is actually pretty distinctive, and you can learn it in the winter. So that one went down. It sounded kind of like a Nashville. That can be a bit confusing. But that's the more typical song. They don't always go down. So this is a level musical warble. It's almost ringing. It's very musical, but not that distinctive. So that's yellow-rumped. You know, it's kind of a clue if you're hearing a lot of not very distinctive musical notes, it's probably yellow-rumped. Okay, now for an easy one, that's also a beautiful one, weedo. So hooded warblers. These are another mercifully low species, so they're found in the understory, and they breed in our area, especially in places with some pretty good understory in a mature forest. So they say weedo in the classic call, and then there are other variations like this one. Yeah, and so I haven't done many chip notes for this presentation because I'm trying to keep it as easy as I can. But the hooded warblers have a really distinctive chip note that with practice you can learn, and they make it a lot. So all summer long, if you're walking through Shenandoah, you're going to hear these chip notes. They're very metallic. And the final bird is the yellow-breasted chat. So this one may or may not even be a warbler. I haven't checked the latest taxonomy, but a really charismatic bird found in shrublands in our area. And it doesn't sound much like a warbler. So it sounds more like a mimid, you know, like a thrasher or something, or a mockingbird to me than a warbler. And so pretty distinctive, and the habitat really helps. These are always found in early successional, you know, shrubby places. Really fun to listen to chat. So that concludes the songs. Now just a few slides to wrap it up. So resources. So it's obvious, I think, that it's a challenge to learn all of these songs, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It keeps you coming back year after year, which is fun, and you can make progress throughout your life on these. When you learn all the songs, then you can move on to the call notes, you know, and it's a really good challenge. But it's also difficult, and luckily there are a lot of good resources out there to help bird watchers learn these songs. Like Eleanor mentioned, that we do bird walks at Clifton, and also the Northern Virginia Bird Club does a lot of walks, free walks. The Sibley app is pretty much essential, I would say. So having an app on your phone, either Sibley or Merlin or both, where you can play the song. So when you hear something, you say, okay, it's going down. I think it might be in Nashville. So then you check on your phone and play a few examples of that species and see if it matches or not. That's really helpful. You know, when I was a kid, that didn't exist. We had tape recorders. And I'm sure some of y'all have experienced that too. Really challenging to find the bird on the tape when you need it. So it's really great to have these apps. And also in your pocket, you have the ability to make high quality audio recordings of what you're hearing. And you want to use apps such as Voice Recorder Pro, which is another free app, which enables you to record WAV files. You can then upload those to iNaturalist or to xenocanto.org and get help to identify your song. And here on this slide is an example. So I uploaded a chip note of what I thought was a chestnut-sided warbler, but I wasn't sure, to iNaturalist, and then within just a day, it was confirmed by somebody else who knows a thing or two about warblers. Take-home messages. So I hope I've showed that it helps a lot to narrow down the list of possibilities based on habitat type, elevation, time of year, and if it's up in the top of the canopy or on the ground. And I talked about making recordings. And finally, please don't get discouraged. So I'm showing a royal flycatcher here from the tropics. And the fact is that, at least in the New World, tropical birds have songs that are much easier to learn than these warblers. So warblers are sub-Oscine passerines. They're in the suborder of the sub-Oscines, and they make really complicated songs that are fast and often high-pitched and hard to learn. So, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. We've got all these amazing tropical birds coming through, sub-Oscine tropical birds coming through, but they make songs that are really hard to learn. With that, I'll say thank you and open it up for a few questions. Maybe Eleanor can field those.
Yeah. You said sub-Oscine, you meant Oscine, just to clarify.
For the warbler, yeah, sorry. Yeah, flycatchers. So most tropical birds in the New World are sub-Oscines, like flycatchers, and they have simple songs. The Oscines have complicated songs.
Yeah, maybe that's what you said. Just wanted to clarify.
No, probably not. Yeah, I'm glad you're here listening.
you answered the question about recording apps. Someone asked, any recommendations for hearing enhancement or aids?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know it's coming for us all. I mean, this is something that I'm thinking about in the future. There are a few different options. One of them, unfortunately, I don't think it is made anymore. It's the one that my dad has used, and it's a special device that's made for bird watchers. And instead of just amplifying the sound, it actually lowers the pitch. So the pattern of the bird song is the same, it's just lowered down so that you can hear it. So that works well, but like I say, I'm pretty sure those aren't made anymore. But I haven't looked in the last couple of years to see what is available.
Any other questions in the chat? Or you can also, there's so few of us, you can also just turn your microphone on and ask a question if you would like.
Just overwhelmed. I hope not too overwhelmed. It's good to review every year and definitely use the apps to help you. I didn't mention that, Merlin now is able to identify songs, and it's getting better. So it's something we recommend using, but you definitely want to be cautious when you're using it. There's a lot of bogus records that have been generated by people using Merlin, but it is helpful. So if Merlin thinks it knows what it is, then make a recording yourself and compare it to other species and see if you agree with the machine.
I actually have a question. Aaron Tremper here. Thanks so much for the presentation. First off, it's great. I had a question about whether I have a lot of mockingbirds, northern mockingbirds, as I'm sure a lot of us do. I'm by Huntley Meadows area. I was wondering if I know they mimic a lot of bird songs. Are they one to really jump on warbler songs as well?
Yeah, so if there are warblers that are breeding where they grew up in the nest, then yeah. And I could be wrong about that, but I think mockingbird, yeah, I hesitate to say anything, but the general rule is that birds, when they're learning their songs, they do it while they're babies in the nest. So they're listening to their father and they're listening to the neighbors and they're learning. So yeah, so mockingbirds are gonna mimic whatever species are around them. So around Huntley Meadows, that could be like with monetary warblers, for example, but they probably would not learn the songs of migrating birds.
Interesting. Thank you.
They might, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they might struggle with some of the really high, thin ones. I can't imagine a mockingbird trying to do like a cerulean warbler or something, but the lower, more melodic ones, I would think they would have no trouble with.
I mean, mockingbirds are incredible. They can mimic all sorts of things. Yeah.
Okay, new question in the chat. Any worm-eating warblers here? Merlin has been hearing one in my yard in Old Town Warrenton all this week.
Well, that would be a mistake by Merlin. That would be a classic mistake by Merlin. It's got to be a chipping sparrow in Old Town Warrenton. And they are really similar songs, and so it's not surprising that it would make that mistake. Pine warbler is another possibility, but unlikely. Worm eatings are not here yet. It's a bit early. I mean, there might be one or two trickling in, but it's still too early for worm eating. But you wouldn't expect them breeding in Old Town Warrenton, but they do breed in Shenandoah National Park. And we have like one pair at Clifton as well that breed, but so they require nice hardwood forests for breeding.
I'd also like to point out that Merlin doesn't really know insect songs or sounds, so sometimes it will hear an insect and tell you it's a worm-eating warbler.
There you go. Yep. And the thing that I don't know, ideally, I don't know if Cornell is set up for that, but ideally we would all help train Merlin and make it better. I mean, I assume that when you upload a recording to eBird, then that goes into helping train Merlin. But when you're using Merlin on your phone without submitting a recording, you're not helping to improve the artificial intelligence. So anyway, I think one of the amazing things about bird watching is that there's this army of millions of highly skilled volunteers out there collecting really valuable data, as volunteers. And so that's why I'm such a fan of eBird. I think has really harnessed that, but there are still improvements to be made, and I think Merlin would be an example of that. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. We are done. But come out and see us at Clifton on one of the bird walks, and we will try to get you on some of these warblers. So, and thank you for supporting us and joining this program. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, y'all.